You know, usually when we talk about getting a medical diagnosis, there is this, I don't know, this underlying expectation of precision, right? It feels a lot like engineering.
Yeah, exactly. Very cut and dry.
Right. Like you break your arm and the x-ray shows that jagged white line right on the radius bone and the doctor just points at the film and says, there it is. That is the problem.
It's very binary. I mean, you are looking at a physical structure that is either broken or intact. And so the solution is, well, it's entirely mechanical. You set the bone, you put it in a cast, and you just wait.
Broken or not broken. It's clean, it's structural, and honestly, it just makes logical sense to our brains. And I think because of that, we tend to think of the human heart in the exact same way. Like modern medicine has essentially trained us to view the cardiovascular system as basically a plumbing schematic.
Right, a pump and some pipes.
Exactly. You have a pump, you have pipes, and you have valves. And if a pipe gets clogged with sludge, well, you just go in and clear it out, or you bypass it. And if a valve is leaking, you patch it up or replace it with a synthetic one.
And, that framework is incredibly comforting. I mean, as humans, we desperately want our health issues to be visible, right? Neatly categorized into these mechanical failures that we can just fix with mechanical tools.
Yeah, it gives us a sense of control.
Exactly. But when you step into the actual reality of cardiovascular failure, and especially when you start analyzing it through the lens of modern biophysics or quantum biology and psychosomatic medicine, that simple plumbing schematic, it completely shatters.
It just falls apart.
It really does. You realize you are looking at a diagnostic landscape that is incredibly murky. It is not just about pipes and pumps anymore.
So if looking at cardiovascular failure through biophysics breaks the whole plumbing schematic, how did we end up treating the most complex quantum engine in the human body like a leaky kitchen sink?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Right. So today, our mission for this deep dive is to completely reconstruct everything we know about heart health. We are looking at a massive stack of sources today.
Yes, ranging from classical cardiology to quantum biophysics.
Yeah, and bioresonance and even psychology. We are tracing the journey of the heart from the literal subatomic level where electrons are like actually quantum teleporting inside your cells all the way up to the anatomical level of blockages and leaky valves.
And we really have to explore the psychological realm, too, looking at how your daily emotions physically change the rhythm and the electromagnetic field of your heart.
Absolutely. And finally, for you listening, we are going to lay out a highly practical, holistic roadmap to completely overhaul your cardiovascular health. So, okay, let's unpack this. We have to move beyond the mechanical pump theory, right?
We do. I mean, yes, understanding the physical architecture of the heart and its vessels is critical. But true healing, the kind that actually reverses chronic disease rather than just, managing the symptoms with pills, that requires understanding why the entire system fails at a microscopic energetic level.
Right, the root cause.
Exactly. We have to look at how your physical environment, your emotional state, and even the literal frequencies you're exposed to, how all of that dictates that failure.
So let's start at the physical foundation, because before we zoom all the way down into the quantum realm, we do actually need to understand what goes wrong in the physical tissue first. The mechanical breakdown of congestive heart failure is, a very real, very physical thing.
It absolutely is.
But the fascinating thing I found in the source is that it almost never starts in the heart muscle itself. I mean, when people hear heart failure, they just imagine the heart suddenly getting tired one afternoon and giving out.
Right, like an old motor just quitting. But the reality is it's far more insidious than that. And it begins long before the heart muscle ever shows any signs of fatigue.
So where does it start?
The physiological progression of congestive heart failure often begins far away from the heart, deep inside the peripheral blood vessels. Ground zero for this entire cascade of disease is a condition known as endothelial dysfunction.
Endothelial dysfunction. Okay, let's break that down for the listener. What exactly is the endothelium?
So the endothelium is this ultra-thin, continuous inner lining of your entire vascular system. I mean, it is only one cell thick, but it lines every single artery, vein, and capillary in your body.
Just one cell thick. That sounds incredibly fragile.
It is delicate, yeah. You can think of it kind of like the non-stick Teflon coating on a brand new frying pan. Its primary job is to keep everything flowing smoothly, right? To prevent blood from clotting unnecessarily and to regulate how the blood vessels expand and contract.
But of course, that perfect, slippery Teflon coating gets scratched.
It gets chronically damaged over time. And High blood pressure is a major culprit here. Imagine water just blasting through a garden hose at maximum pressure. That creates mechanical shear stress. It literally physically tears at those delicate endothelial cells.
Oh.
Yeah. And then you add environmental toxins or the chemicals from cigarette smoke or chronically high blood sugar. This constant barrage injures that single cell layer, causing it to become highly permeable. It essentially loses its tight seal and develops these microscopic cracks.
And once those cracks form, we have a breach in the fortress. And this is where cholesterol enters the picture, right? Because we constantly hear that cholesterol clogs arteries, like it's just floating sludge.
Well, here is where the nuance is really critical. We often label low-density lipoprotein, or LDL cholesterol, as the bad cholesterol.
Right.
But LDL is simply a transport vehicle. It's carrying vital lipids that your cells actually need for energy and for membrane repair.
So it's supposed to be there.
Exactly. The problem only occurs when that endothelial lining is damaged. The LDL particles, they slip through those microscopic cracks, and they get trapped inside the arterial wall itself, in a space called the intima.
Wait, so the cholesterol is actually stuck inside the wall of the pipe, not just floating in the middle of it.
Yes, exactly, inside the wall. But just having cholesterol stuck there isn't the whole problem. It's what happens to it while it's trapped.
What happens?
Well, the trapped LDL cholesterol undergoes a chemical transformation. It oxidizes.
Oxidizes.
Yeah, you can visualize this as the fat literally rusting.
Resting fat, that sounds awful.
It is. It's exposed to free radicals and reactive oxygen species, and that changes its molecular structure entirely. Now, your body's immune system is incredibly intelligent. It recognizes this rusted, oxidized cholesterol not as a nutrient anymore, but as a dangerous foreign invader.
So it mounts an attack.
Right. The immune system dispatches these specialized white blood cells called macrophages to the site.
And macrophage literally translates to big eater, right? So these are the cleanup crew.
They are the cellular cleanup crew. Their whole directive is to consume the oxidized lipids, clear the area, and just resolve the inflammation. But the macrophages encounter a catastrophic problem. They gorge themselves on the oxidized cholesterol. They eat so much of this toxic, rusted lipid material that they just cannot process it. They swell up, and ultimately they die right there on the wall, transforming into something pathologists call foam cells.
Wow, that is such a visceral, disturbing image. Your own immune cells are literally eating themselves to death trying to clean up this rusted fat, and their dead bodies turn into a toxic foam inside your artery walls.
Yes, and that dead foam just accumulates.
Yeah.
It forms a necrotic core within the arterial wall. And to trick and contain this toxic mess, the smooth muscle cells of the artery migrate over the top of it and form a fibrous cap, basically trying to wall it off from the bloodstream.
Like putting a Band-Aid over a toxic waste dump.
Exactly. And along with calcium deposits, this entire structure hardens. This is an atherosclerotic plaque. This is the structural blockage that everyone fears.
Now, a blockage causes problems in two distinct ways, mechanically speaking, right? First, it can simply grow so large and thick that it physically restricts the flow of blood.
Right, that's called stable ischemia. The pipe is narrowed. So when you try to walk up a flight of stairs, your heart muscle screams for more oxygen, but the narrowed pipe simply can't deliver the blood volume required. And that causes chest pain or angina.
But the second scenario is much more violent, isn't it?
Much more. That fibrous cap trying to hold in the toxic foam can weaken, especially if systemic inflammation in the body is high. And if that cap suddenly ruptures, the highly thrombogenic, sticky contents of the plaque are instantly exposed to the flowing blood.
And the body freaks out.
It treats this rupture just like a cut in your finger. It instantly forms a massive blood clot to seal the wound. But this clot forms inside the artery, completely occluding the vessel in a matter of seconds.
And that is a heart attack.
That is an acute myocardial infarction. The tissue downstream of the clot instantly begins to suffocate and die.
Okay, so this brings us to the vicious cycle of heart failure. Let's say a person survives that heart attack, or, they are just dealing with decades of those narrowed, stiff pipes. The heart muscle is now either permanently damaged from a lack of oxygen, or it is facing massive resistance every single time it tries to push blood into the body.
Right. The workload is immense.
But the brain and the organs, they still demand their blood supply.
Yeah.
So the heart tries to compensate. It's like, I was thinking about this earlier, it's like trying to drive a car with a blocked fuel line by just mashing your foot harder and harder on the gas pedal. You might get the car to move a little bit, but you are completely destroying the engine in the process.
That is a perfect analogy. The compensatory mechanisms of the human body are fascinating, but in the case of heart failure, they're ultimately destructive. When the heart fails to pump an adequate volume of blood, what we call reduced cardiac output, the body basically panics.
It thinks you're dying.
It assumes you must be bleeding to death. So it initiates this cascade of survival protocols meant to save your life over the next 10 minutes. But these exact protocols will destroy the heart over the next 10 years.
So what's the first thing the heart does to try and fix the low output?
The first immediate response relies on the Frank-Starling mechanism. The physical muscle fibers of the heart literally stretch out. By dilating the chamber and stretching the fibers, the heart can accommodate a larger volume of blood, and that stretch creates a stronger recoil.
Oh, like pulling a rubber band back further so it snaps harder when you let it go.
Exactly. But as you know, a rubber band can only be stretched so many times before it loses its elasticity and becomes loose and floppy. And while the heart is stretching, your autonomic nervous system simultaneously kicks into high gear.
The fight or flight response.
Yes. It senses the drop in blood pressure and triggers sympathetic dominance. The brain floods the cardiovascular system with adrenaline and noradrenaline, and these hormones just whip the heart, forcing it to beat faster and contract with more sheer force.
Wait, hold on. Let me ask a pushback question here. If my bicep works hard, it gets bigger and stronger, right? If I flood my body with adrenaline and lift heavy weights, my muscles adapt. Why wouldn't a heart just get stronger from pumping harder? I mean, isn't it just a muscle?
It is a muscle, and initially, it actually does adapt by growing larger. This is called cardiac remodeling. But in the heart, bigger is actually worse.
Worse. How?
Well, when the left ventricle is faced with chronic pressure, overload like trying to pump against those stiff atherosclerotic arteries or narrowed valve, the muscle walls undergo concentric hypertrophy, meaning they thicken inward.
So the walls get beefy and thick, but because the outside of the heart is constrained by the pericardial sac, it can't grow outward. So the muscle grows toward the inside of the chamber.
Yes, and that is the fatal flaw. As the muscle thickens inward, the actual interior volume of the chamber shrinks drastically. It can hold much less blood.
Oh, I see.
Furthermore, this thick, bulky muscle requires vastly more oxygen and energy, which those already clogged coronary arteries simply cannot provide. So the muscle becomes stiff and fibrotic. It loses its ability to relax properly during diastole, which is the filling phase.
And obviously, if it can't relax, it can't fill up with blood in the first place.
Precisely. This specific pathology is known as heart failure with preserved ejection fraction, or HFpEF. If you measure the ejection fraction, the percentage of blood pumped out with each beat, it looks normal, maybe 60%. But 60% of a tiny, shrunken, stiff chamber is an absolutely minuscule volume of actual blood.
Wow. Okay, so that's if it gets thick. What happens if the heart goes the other way? What if the rubber band just gives out completely?
That leads to eccentric remodeling. Over time, or in the case of massive volume overload, the muscle fibers simply cannot maintain the tension anymore. The cellular bonds begin to slip, the heart dilates, stretching outward like a balloon that has been overinflated way too many times.
So it just gets baggy.
Very baggy. The ventricular walls become incredibly thin, weak, and flabby. The chamber is massively enlarged, but it has almost zero contractile power. This results in a catastrophic drop in ejection fraction, leading to heart failure with reduced ejection fraction, or HFrEF.
So you either thicken inward until you are a stiff, tiny rock, or you blow outward until you are a weak, flabby balloon.
Yes, unfortunately.
And this whole time, the rest of the body is making things worse, right? Because we haven't even talked about the kidneys yet. When the kidneys sense low blood pressure, they hit the panic button, too.
Oh, the kidneys' response is perhaps the most damaging part of the entire cycle. When blood flow to the kidneys drops, they activate the RAAS. That's the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system.
Okay, RAAS. What does that do?
Well, the kidneys release an enzyme called renin, which cascades through the liver and lungs to produce angiotensin II.
And angiotensin II is an extremely potent vasoconstrictor, right?
It is one of the most powerful vasoconstrictors in human biology. It violently clamps down on your peripheral blood vessels to artificially raise your blood pressure.
Which is the exact opposite of what the struggling heart needs.
Exactly. And simultaneously, it triggers the adrenal glands to release aldosterone. That's a hormone that commands the kidneys to hold on to sodium and water.
Let's visualize this entire catastrophe for a second. You have a heart that is either thick and stiff or thin and flabby. It is already exhausted. The brain is whipping it with adrenaline to beat faster. The kidneys have just completely clamped shut the pipes the heart is trying to pump into, creating massive resistance. And to top it all off, the body is aggressively hoarding water, increasing the total volume of heavy fluid this failing pump has to move.
That is the ultimate clinical definition of congestive heart failure. The heart is facing a massive increase in afterload. That's the resistance it must overcome to eject blood. And the retained fluid drastically increases the preload, the sheer volume stretching the heart before it pumps.
It's an impossible workload.
It is. The muscle completely exhausts itself. The fluid has nowhere to go, so it backs up. It seeps into the lungs, causing extreme shortness of breath, and it pools in the lower extremities, causing massive edema, swelling in the legs and ankles.
We also need to factor in the mechanical leaks. The sources talked heavily about valvular heart disease because it's not just the pipes that fail, the internal doors between the chambers fail too.
Yes, valvular dysfunction acts as a profound mechanical stressor that just accelerates this whole timeline. The two most common mechanical leaks we see are mitral valve regurgitation and aortic regurgitation.
And regurgitation just means it leaks backwards, right?
Exactly. Regurgitation simply means the valve leaflets fail to close and seal completely. So instead of blood flowing on a strict one-way street, a significant portion of it leaks backward with every single heartbeat.
So if the mitral valve, that's the door separating the top left chamber from the main bottom left pumping chamber, if that's leaking, what happens when the main pump squeezes?
When the powerful left ventricle contracts to send blood out to the body, a percentage of that blood shoots backward through the leaky mitral valve right back into the atrium.
Oh, that's terribly inefficient.
It means the heart has to work twice as hard, pumping a much larger total volume of blood just to maintain a normal net output to the body. And that backward flow eventually backs up into the pulmonary veins and straight into the lungs themselves.
And before we leave the physical anatomy, we really have to mention how metabolic diseases accelerate this entire structural breakdown. It is impossible to talk about the physical decay of the heart without bringing obesity and diabetes into the conversation. They act as massive accelerators.
They absolutely act as gasoline on the fire. Obesity systematically alters your lipid metabolism. It lowers your high-density lipoprotein, the good HDL that clears out cholesterol, and it raises the bad circulating triglycerides, which supplies endless raw material for those atherosclerotic plaques.
But diabetes, the sources made it seem like diabetes is a uniquely destructive force.
It is.
Because of the sugar in the blood. I mean, how does sugar actually break a physical heart?
Well, when blood glucose levels remain chronically elevated, those sugar molecules begin to spontaneously bond to the proteins and lipids in your blood vessels without the need for any enzymes. This process is called glycation, and it creates advanced glycation end products, which are appropriately acronymized as BG.
Advanced glycation end products. So what do these AGEs physically do to the tissue?
Think of caramelizing onions in a hot pan.
Okay.
The sugars bond and they turn brown, sticky, and stiff. That is literally what is happening to your vascular tissue. The arterial walls become incredibly stiff, sticky, and highly prone to severe inflammation.
It's caramelizing your veins.
Essentially, yes. This glycation completely destroys microvascular function, the tiny microscopic capillaries that dive deep into the heart muscle to feed it oxygen. Furthermore, the high sugar environment damages the autonomic nerves that control the heart's electrical rhythm, which is a condition called diabetic autonomic neuropathy.
So diabetes attacks the structural pipes, the microplumbing, and the electrical wiring of the heart all at the exact same time.
It does. It is a systemic assault.
Okay. That is an incredibly thorough look at the mechanical breakdown. We understand the plumbing, the structural reality, the thick versus flabby muscle, and the resting cholesterol. But if we stop here, we are missing the most fundamental engine of the disease.
We are.
Because while the anatomy explains the physical damage, it does not explain how a living cell actually loses the energy required to pump. If we just look at the physical structures, we are looking at the car's body without understanding the engine.
That's right.
So if the physical pipes are clogged, how does the engine keep running? Or rather, why does it stop? Here's where it gets really interesting, because we need to zoom in by a factor of 1 billion. We are leaving classical physics behind and entering the quantum engine of the heart.
This transition is where our entire understanding of cardiovascular disease is undergoing a massive disruptive paradigm shift. We really have to appreciate the sheer energy demand of the human heart.
It's massive, right?
It beats roughly 100,000 times a day, every single day, without a single pause for rest. To generate the ATP, that's adenosine triphosphate, the fundamental cellular energy currency required for this relentless mechanical work, The mitochondria inside your heart cells must process an absolutely staggering number of electrons.
The source material had a number for this. How many electrons are we talking about?
To sustain a human heart for 24 hours, the mitochondrial electron transport chains must process approximately 20.8 times 10 to the 25th power electrons.
20.8 times 10 to the 25th. I mean, that number is so large it basically loses meaning. It is astronomically large.
It's a flow of subatomic particles so vast it honestly rivals the stars. Inside the inner membrane of the mitochondria, there are 5 protein complexes. These complexes strip electrons from the food you eat and pass them down the line to generate the electrical gradient needed to synthesize ATP. For decades, classical biochemistry taught us that these electrons were essentially hopping from one protein complex to the next. You can visualize it like a line of people passing buckets of water to put out a fire.
Right, classical physics. An object moving through physical space over a specific amount of time.
Exactly. But when biophysicists finally sat down and calculated the actual speed at which ATP must be produced to sustain a beating heart, they realized something profound. The math of classical physics completely fails.
Wait, what do you mean the math fails?
The physical distance between those protein complexes inside the mitochondria is simply too vast for an electron to physically hop across in the time required.
Oh, wow.
If electrons relied on classical thermal hopping, the ATP production rate would be drastically too slow, and the heart would stop beating within seconds. The only way the biological math works, the only way the heart can generate energy that fast, is if the electrons are utilizing a phenomenon known as quantum tunneling.
Okay, this is where it gets mind-bending. Quantum tunneling. For anyone listening, this is not a science fiction concept. This is happening by the billions inside your chest right now. So in classical physics, if you throw a tennis ball at a solid brick wall, the ball bounces back. It physically does not possess the kinetic energy to penetrate the barrier.
Right.
But in quantum mechanics, we don't treat an electron as a solid ball, do we? We treat it as a probability wave.
Yes, the wave function. According to the Schrödinger equation, when an electron encounters an impenetrable energy barrier, like the gap between the protein complexes in the mitochondria, the wave function does not drop to zero immediately. It decays exponentially across the barrier.
Meaning there is a statistical probability that the electron will simply disappear on one side of the uncrossable gap and instantaneously reappear on the other side.
Yes.
It teleports.
It literally bypasses the physical space without crossing it in a classical sense. The mitochondria in your heart cells rely entirely on this subatomic teleportation to sustain the massive, rapid electron flow required to keep you alive. But here is the critical vulnerability.
What's the vulnerability?
The mathematics of quantum tunneling are exquisitely, terrifyingly sensitive to distance.
The physical distance of the gap it has to teleport across.
Exactly. The tunneling probability formula dictates that the chance of an electron successfully teleporting drops exponentially as the barrier length increases. If the physical distance between those mitochondrial proteins increases by even a fraction of a nanometer, the probability of the electron making the jump drops to near absolute zero.
And this is where the microscopic physics connects back to the macroscopic disease we were talking about earlier. How does that gap widen in a failing heart?
Through oxidative stress. When the cardiovascular system is under chronic stress, whether from the sheer mechanical force of high blood pressure, the toxicity of oxidized LDL cholesterol, or the heavy metals we will discuss later, the cells produce massive amounts of reactive oxygen species, free radicals.
So they attack the mitochondria.
These highly reactive molecules physically assault the delicate lipid membranes of the mitochondria.
They damage the membrane.
They cause lipid peroxidation. The mitochondrial membrane physically swells, distorts, and loses its tight structural integrity.
Which physically pushes the protein complexes further apart.
Yes, it widens the quantum barrier. The electrons arrive at the gap, but the distance is now too vast for their wave function to reach the other side. The quantum tunneling probability crashes.
Oh, yeah.
The electrons can no longer teleport efficiently. The electrical current halts and ATP production flatlines. This is the true, absolute subatomic root of congestive heart failure. It is a state of severe metabolic exhaustion because the quantum mechanics of the cell have been structurally destroyed.
So the heart doesn't just get tired. It literally loses the structural geometry required to conduct quantum energy.
That's exactly right.
That completely reorganizes how you view cardiovascular decay. It's a quantum engine that has lost its precision tuning. But the fascinating thing in the reading was that electrons aren't the only quantum phenomena happening in the heart. The clinical data suggests the heart is also communicating using actual physical light.
Yes, we are entering the realm of biophoton emission here. This is another fundamental reality of quantum biology that it sounds magical, but is entirely measurable. Living organisms, and specifically the highly active cells of the heart and the DNA coiled within them, constantly emit ultra-weak electromagnetic radiation. These are called biophotons.
Now, when you say it emits light, I immediately think of a light bulb. But a light bulb scatters light everywhere in complete chaos. This biophotonic light is different, isn't it?
Very different. The light emitted by healthy DNA is highly coherent, very similar to the focused beam of a laser. Because it is coherent and phase-aligned, this light has the capacity to carry massive amounts of informational data.
Wow.
Quantum biologists propose that this biophotonic network is the primary mechanism by which cells communicate instantaneously across the entire body, far faster than chemical hormones traveling through the bloodstream. It orchestrates complex, microscopic repair mechanisms and organizes large-scale biological timing.
So the heart cells are literally communicating with the rest of the body using microscopic lasers.
Essentially, yes.
Yeah.
But in a failing heart, a heart that is drowning in oxidative stress and struggling to pump, this light changes. Because the cellular structure is degrading, the biophoton emission loses its tight coherence.
It gets messy.
It becomes chaotic, scattered, and incoherent, much like that messy light bulb. The communication network breaks down. The failing heart is no longer sending clear, organized biophotonic signals to the rest of the biological system.
Okay, let me try to synthesize this massive leap in scale we just took. Deep down in the subatomic basement, the heart is running on the quantum teleportation of electrons to generate energy, and it is coordinating with the rest of the body's cells via coherent laser light.
Right.
But how does this microscopic, invisible activity organize the macroscopic human being? I mean, how does a chaotic biophoton tell the physical brain what to do?
That question leads us to the heart-based resonant field theory, or the HBRF model. This theory, which is extensively detailed in the literature by biophysicists like Dr. Abdullah Al-Abdughadir, it posits that viewing the heart merely as a mechanical pump is a severe biological understatement. From a macroscopic biophysical standpoint, the heart is the body's primary coherence stabilizer.
A macroscopic coherence stabilizer. Let's unpack the physics of that.
The physical contraction of the human heart muscle generates an electromagnetic field that is immensely powerful. It is roughly 100 times stronger than the electromagnetic field produced by the human brain.
100 times stronger.
Yes. This cardiac field is so robust that it is not confined to the skin. It can be cleanly detected and measured by sensitive magnetometers several feet outside of the physical body.
Which is just wild to sit and think about. The electromagnetic energy of your heart is physically extending out into the room you're sitting in right now, interacting with the space around you.
It absolutely is. And within the confines of your body, this massive pulsing electromagnetic field acts as a central biological oscillator. It is the master pacemaker for the entire system. The rhythmic pulsing of the heart's field physically entrains or synchronizes the neural firing patterns in the brain and the autonomic nervous system.
It imposes order. It's like the heart is an orchestra conductor. You have billions of cells, the string section, the brass, the percussion, and left to their own devices, they are just making chaotic quantum noise, tuning up, plucking strings randomly.
Exactly.
The heart steps up to the podium, waves the baton of this massive electromagnetic field, and tunes that chaotic quantum noise into a unified, synchronized symphony, and then it hands the sheet music up to the brain to execute.
That is an exceptionally accurate metaphor. The heart's field phase aligns the disparate rhythms of the body. But what makes the HBRF model truly staggering is what the conductor is listening to. I mean, what is setting the rhythm for the heart?
Right, because the conductor has to get the tempo from somewhere.
The research indicates that human heart rate variability rhythms, the microscopic millisecond fluctuations in the time between your consecutive heartbeats, exhibit temporal coherence with variations in the Earth's own magnetic field.
Wait, the planet itself?
Yes. The Earth has a resonant electromagnetic cavity between the surface of the planet and the inner edge of the ionosphere. Lightning strikes occurring globally generate electromagnetic waves that become trapped in this cavity, pulsing at specific resonant frequencies, primarily between 8 and 32 hertz. These are known as the Schumann resonances.
And our physiological hearts tune into that planetary frequency.
Massive data sets analyzing human autonomic nervous system rhythms over long periods show that our internal cardiac rhythms can synchronize with these global geomagnetic modes. The heart's electromagnetic field operates within the exact same frequency bands as the Schumann resonances.
That is unbelievable.
Therefore, the heart is not just synchronizing your internal cellular symphony, it is acting as a biological antenna, coupling your physiological rhythms to the resonant frequencies of the planet.
Okay, my mind is thoroughly blown. We are walking quantum antennas tuned to the resonant frequency of the Earth, orchestrating our cells with light.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, yes.
But let's ground this back into our daily reality. Because if our nervous system controls this incredibly delicate, coherent rhythm, it begs the question, what happens when we disrupt the conductor? Because if the heart is a highly tuned antenna, what happens when we start feeding it static?
That is the pivotal question, and it moves us directly into the mind-heart axis. Because psychological and emotional stress is perhaps the most potent, destructive source of static you can introduce to this bioenergetic system.
Let's talk about the biological danger of chronic stress, because casually everyone says, oh, stress is bad for your heart, but they usually just mean it might raise your blood pressure for an hour. The clinical data paints a much more granular, terrifying picture of what emotional stress actually physically does to the cardiovascular system.
We have to differentiate between acute survival stress and modern chronic stress. Chronic stress, PTSD, severe daily anxiety, or deep depression, these states lock your autonomic nervous system into permanent sympathetic dominance. You're biologically trapped in the fight-or-flight response, but there is no physical tiger to run from.
Right.
Your body is perpetually flooded with cortisol and adrenaline.
The gas pedal is jammed to the floor 24 hours a day.
Yes. And physiologically, this chronic state of biochemical emergency triggers widespread systemic inflammation. It dramatically and persistently raises a specific inflammatory marker in your blood called C-reactive protein, or CRP.
And CRP is incredibly dangerous for those plaques we talked about at the very beginning of this deep dive.
It is the trigger mechanism for a heart attack. CRP deeply degrades the endothelial lining and infiltrates those existing atherosclerotic plaques. It activates enzymes that literally digest the fibrous cap holding the plaque together, making it highly unstable and extremely vulnerable to rupture.
Wow.
So your psychological emotional stress is actively physically dissolving the structural integrity of your arteries, making an acute myocardial infarction far more likely.
And if we look at this electromagnetically rather than chemically, what does stress look like? If we hook someone up to a highly sensitive heart rate variability monitor when they are actively angry or deeply frustrated, what do we see on the screen?
You see what the researchers at the Institute of Heart Math classify as an incoherent heart rhythm. If you map the varying time intervals between heartbeats on a graph, the resulting waveform looks completely erratic, jagged, and chaotic.
It looks exactly like a stock market crash graph. Just jagged, violent, unpredictable spikes.
That jagged, erratic wave is the visual representation of your autonomic nervous system actively fighting itself. It is the biological equivalent of driving a car with one foot mashed hard on the gas pedal, the sympathetic nervous system, and the other foot mashed hard on the brake, the parasympathetic nervous system.
That's going to tear the car apart.
It destroys the mechanical fuel efficiency of the heart, it creates massive physical wear and tear on the valves and vessels, and it rapidly depletes your cellular quantum energy reserves.
But the influence isn't just a one-way street, is it? The brain stresses the heart, yes, but the heart also dictates what the brain is fundamentally allowed to perceive. This was one of the most fascinating biophysical facts I encountered in the research, the concept of the emotional gating of consciousness.
This phenomenon truly highlights the hierarchy of the mind-heart axis. The physical, mechanical beating of your heart literally gates or filters your conscious awareness of physical reality.
Really? How?
Every single time your heart contracts during systole, the forceful squeeze that ejects blood, it sends a massive high-pressure burst of neurological signals up the vagus nerve directly into the brain via sensory neurons called baroreceptors.
And what does that high-pressure burst do to the brain's processing centers?
It completely alters sensory perception. During that brief millisecond of systole, the baroreceptor burst actively suppresses exteroceptive sensitivity, meaning for a fraction of a second, your brain actually numbs you slightly to outside physical pain.
Wait, right?
Yes, but simultaneously, this same systolic burst heightens the amygdala's awareness of fear, threat, and negative social cues. It makes you instantly hypervigilant to danger.
Oh, wow. Have you ever stubbed your toe or cut your hand right in the middle of a massive screaming argument and you barely even felt it? But then, 5 minutes later when you calm down, it suddenly throbs in agony. That's your heart literally shutting off your brain's pain receptors and amplifying your threat detection so you can focus entirely on the perceived danger of the argument.
That is exactly the mechanism at work.
Yeah.
The heart tells the brain what to prioritize. Conversely, during diastole, the relaxation phase of the heartbeat when the chamber is refilling with blood, the baroreceptor firing goes completely quiet.
So the gating opens up.
Exactly. This quiet period is the biological window of openness for sensory processing. The brain becomes much more receptive to learning, to fine motor action, and to open, calm perception of the environment. So the rhythmic beating of your heart is dynamically sculpting your conscious access to the world, second by second, beat by beat.
Think about the implications of that. If your heart rhythm is chaotic and jagged because you are stressed, the timing of those baroreceptor bursts is completely erratic. You are sending chaotic, fear-amplifying signals to your brain constantly.
That's the trap.
You are biologically trapped in a loop of anxiety where the heart tells the brain to be afraid and the brain tells the heart to beat more erratically. How on earth do we break that loop?
We break the loop by consciously intervening at the level of the heart, utilizing the power of cardiac coherence. The extensive research by HeartMath demonstrates that human beings have the conscious ability to instantly shift this rhythmic pattern.
How do we do that?
When an individual intentionally generates and sustains a positive, renewing emotion, such as deep appreciation, genuine care, or profound compassion, the physical rhythm of the heart instantaneously transforms.
It goes from that jagged stock market crash static to a completely different shape.
It shifts into a beautiful, highly regular, perfectly ordered sine wave pattern. This state is scientifically defined as psychophysiological coherence. When the heart enters this coherent state, the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches of the autonomic nervous system perfectly synchronize.
They stop fighting each other.
They stop fighting and start dancing in step. Furthermore, the massive electromagnetic field of the heart and the electrical rhythms of the brain phase lock, they entrain to the exact same resonant frequency.
And the physiological downstream effects of that sine wave coherence are immediate, aren't they?
Immediate and system-wide. Coherence instantly enhances cognitive clarity, improves complex problem solving, and most importantly, it sends highly stable, harmonious afferent signals up the vagus nerve to the thalamus and the amygdala.
So it tells the brain to chill out.
It literally broadcasts a physical signal to the brain's fear center that the environment is safe and it is time to power down the stress response. You're consciously using the electromagnetic power of your heart to physically rewrite the neurochemistry of your brain.
So what does this all mean for you? If your mind has the power to heal your heart through coherence, what in the outside physical world is actively trying to break it? Because we don't live in a vacuum. We live in a highly complex, industrialized, modern world. It's not just stress throwing off the conductor, it's the physical environment we inhabit.
We absolutely cannot discuss the true pathology of heart failure without aggressively examining the environmental pollutants that directly sabotage both the physical plumbing of the blood vessels and the delicate quantum mechanics of the mitochondria.
The clinical literature points to two massive, ubiquitous culprits that are actively destroying cardiovascular health: heavy metals and modern plasticizers. Let's tackle heavy metals first. We are talking about elements like lead, cadmium, and mercury. How do these metals physically break the heart?
Heavy metals are insidious because they bioaccumulate. Even incredibly low-level chronic exposure, which is staggeringly common through municipal water supplies, agricultural soil, and aging infrastructure, acts as a massive, independent cardiovascular risk factor.
Like, how bad is it?
The clinical data puts heavy metal burden on par with chronic smoking for heart disease risk. Once in the bloodstream, these metals cause intense, localized oxidative stress directly against the endothelial lining.
They act like microscopic sandpaper on that Teflon coating.
Precisely. And worse, they actively promote severe arterial calcification. They interfere with the body's calcium signaling, causing calcium to deposit not in the bones, but directly into the muscular walls of the arteries.
Wow.
They literally turn flexible, living blood vessels into rigid, stony, calcified tubes, driving chronic, treatment-resistant hypertension.
And what about the plastics? Because the research on this is genuinely terrifying. Phthalates, bisphenol A, microplastics, they are in literally everything we touch. Food packaging, the linings of canned goods, synthetic clothing, even the thermal receipts you get at the grocery store.
The ubiquity of plasticizers is a modern biological crisis. Chemicals like phthalates are not tightly covalently bound to the plastic polymers they are mixed with. This means they leach out incredibly easily into our food, into our drinking water, and eventually directly into our bloodstream.
And then what?
Once inside the human body, these chemicals act as severe endocrine disruptors. But in the context of the heart, they have a very specific, devastating target, the mitochondria.
They poison the quantum power plants.
They absolutely do. Plasticizers aggressively infiltrate the heart cells and cause severe mitochondrial dysfunction. They disrupt the lipid membranes we talked about earlier, widening the gap and crashing the quantum electron tunneling probability.
Oh, man.
They also cause pathological lipid accumulation directly within the muscle tissue of the heart. But the most alarming mechanism of action discovered recently is their ability to trigger a process called pyroptosis.
Pyroptosis. The prefix pyro means fire, so fiery cell death.
It is quite literally a fiery death. To understand it, we contrast it with apoptosis, which is the body's normal, healthy mechanism for programmed cell death. When a cell gets old or damaged, apoptosis is like quietly packing up the house, recycling the usable materials, and peacefully shutting down without disturbing the neighbors.
Right.
Pyroptosis, however, is a violent alarm system. It is triggered by an intracellular sensor called the NLRP3 inflammasome.
Think of the inflammasome like a microscopic, highly sensitive panic button inside the heart cell.
Exactly. When a leached plasticizer chemical touches that inflammasome panic button, the cell realizes it has been deeply compromised. It initiates pyroptosis. The cell rapidly swells, its membrane violently bursts open, and it violently spills highly inflammatory cytokines and cellular contents into the surrounding tissue.
That sounds chaotic.
It triggers a massive cascading immune panic and severe inflammation in the surrounding healthy heart muscle. Plasticizers actively and continuously trigger this fiery death in your cardiomyocytes.
So we are dealing with a brutal dual threat here. On the macroscopic scale, heavy metals are physically calcifying and clogging the plumbing. And simultaneously, on the subatomic scale, plasticizers are triggering fiery cell death and creating massive oxidative stress that widens the gaps in the mitochondria, destroying the quantum electron tunneling we talked about earlier. They're annihilating the pipes and the quantum engine at the exact same time.
That is the tragedy of modern environmental toxicity. It is a multi-scalar, relentless assault on the cardiovascular system from the inside out.
Okay, this has been an incredibly heavy, dense journey into the pathology of the heart. We thoroughly understand the physical blockages, the loss of quantum tunneling, the chaotic emotional rhythms of stress, and the fiery cellular death caused by modern toxins. We know exactly how the heart breaks. But the mission of this deep dive is to reconstruct. So how do we reverse this damage? Let's transition to the practical roadmap.
Let's do it.
And instead of starting with traditional pharmaceuticals, I want to start with the most cutting-edge biophysical intervention the literature discusses, restoring the energetic resonance of the cells.
If we accept the premise that the heart is a bioantenna that has lost its tuning due to stress and toxicity, it logically follows that we must look at biophysical therapies capable of resetting that tune. This introduces the emerging field of bioresonance therapy, which uses specific frequency-emitting devices to influence cellular behavior.
Right, because classical allopathic medicine uses biochemistry pharmaceutical drugs to forcibly alter the physical body. Bioresonance uses the principles of physics. It uses frequencies, sound, and electromagnetic pulses to guide the body.
Precisely. To understand how this works, we look to the work of quantum biologists like Dr. Bruce Lipton. He proposed a radical shift in cellular biology. The physical cell membrane, not the DNA nucleus, actually functions as the brain, or the central processor of the cell. The outer membrane is densely covered in integral membrane proteins that act as receptor antennas.
So they are receiving signals.
These antennas are constantly reading environmental vibrational signals.
So the environment, specifically the electromagnetic frequencies surrounding the cell, exerts direct control over cellular behavior.
Yes, through a mechanism called epigenetic modulation. The frequencies received by the cell membrane antennas dictate how the DNA inside the nucleus is expressed. A specific frequency can literally signal a gene to turn on a repair mechanism, or, conversely, silence an inflammatory pathway.
Is there data on this?
The research of Dr. Carlo Ventura at the University of Bologna is foundational here. His team demonstrated that exposing stem cells to specific extremely low frequencies, particularly between 54 Hz and 210 Hz, can significantly upregulate the genes directly associated with cellular repair and stem cell differentiation.
They are essentially broadcasting a precise repair-yourself radio signal to the cellular quantum computers. And this isn't just theoretical Petri dish science. There was an incredibly concrete, practical example in the sources regarding sound therapy.
Yes, an excellent 2023 double-blind physiological study examined the systemic responses to Himalayan singing bowl sessions. This is a very pure, ancient, and highly resonant form of acoustic sound frequency therapy. The physiological results were measurable, rapid, and highly significant.
What did they find?
A single 20-minute session resulted in an average 31% decrease in circulating cortisol, the primary stress hormone.
A 31% drop in the hormone that actively destroys the heart, achieved in just 20 minutes of listening to a resonant frequency.
It is remarkable. Furthermore, that cortisol drop was coupled with a 27% increase in oxytocin, the hormone responsible for social bonding, cellular healing, and parasympathetic activation.
Wow.
And on a purely mechanical level, the resonant frequency dropped the subject's systolic blood pressure by an average of 10.4 millimeters of mercury. That is a reduction in blood pressure that is entirely comparable to many standard pharmaceutical interventions, achieved without a single chemical entering the body, simply through resonant acoustic frequency phase-locking the autonomic nervous system.
But this brings up a crucial logistical point. Frequencies, thoughts, and coherence breathing are incredibly powerful tools for resetting the software of the human body. They tell the body what to do. But if your physical arteries are aggressively clogged with calcified heavy metals and rusted oxidized cholesterol, you still have a massive hardware problem.
That raises an important question.
Right. Yeah. Frequencies and thoughts are powerful, but you also have to give the physical body the building blocks to rebuild the damaged tissue.
Absolutely correct. A beautiful resonant frequency cannot spontaneously build new vascular tissue out of thin air, nor can it magically teleport heavy metals out of your intestines. The physics must be supported by the biochemistry. This is where we lay out the holistic roadmap to recovery.
Okay, let's get into the roadmap.
For a patient looking to transition from merely managing symptoms with medication to actually reversing the bioenergetic decay, we need a concrete daily plan involving targeted diet, specific detoxification pathways, and rigorous coherence habits.
Let's build that roadmap, starting with the foundation, diet. The goal here is natural detoxification, shutting down the NLRP3 inflammasome and reducing that initial endothelial inflammation. What does the clinical data explicitly recommend for rebuilding the pipes?
The clinical consensus overwhelmingly supports a definitive transition to specific plant-based dietary patterns, most notably the Mediterranean and the DSH diets. These specific nutritional frameworks are clinically proven to not only reduce overall heart failure mortality rates, but to actively improve the ejection fraction of the failing heart over time.
And the mechanism for why they work is crucial. It's not just about eating fewer calories. It is because these diets are densely packed with anti-inflammatory omega-3 fatty acids, powerful plant polyphenols, and massive amounts of dietary fiber, which directly soothe the inflamed endothelium. But what about the specific threat of heavy metals? Lead, cadmium, mercury. How do we practically, dietary-wise, pull those out of the heart tissue?
To remove heavy metals, you have to actively support and upregulate the body's natural chelation pathways. Chelation comes from the Greek word for claw. We need to provide the body with molecules that can act like chemical claws, grabbing onto these toxic metals in the deep tissue and pulling them out of the body.
What's the best molecule for that?
The absolute most important master molecule for this process is glutathione. It is your liver's primary detoxification weapon.
And how will we ensure our bodies are manufacturing enough glutathione to handle modern toxicity?
You must provide the biological raw materials, specifically organic sulfur. Consuming highly sulfur-rich foods like raw garlic, onions, broccoli, cauliflower, and Brussels sprouts provides the exact amino acid precursors your liver requires to constantly synthesize high levels of glutathione.
So eat your broccoli.
Yes. Once the glutathione is produced, it circulates, acts like a claw, grabs the heavy metals, and carries them back to the liver. The liver then dumps these highly toxic heavy metal complexes into your bile, which flows down into your intestines to be excreted in your stool.
But there is a massive biological trapdoor here that derails most detox attempts, isn't there?
Yes, the process of intrahepatic recirculation. The human body is designed to recycle bile to save energy. If you dump heavy metals into the intestines, but you do not have adequate amounts of physical fiber in your gut to bind them, the walls in your intestines will simply reabsorb the heavy metals straight out of the bile and send them right back into your bloodstream.
You did all the intense biological work to mobilize and detox the metals, only to literally swallow them again.
Exactly.
That is incredibly frustrating. So how do we slam that trapdoor shut? How do we trap the metals in the gut so they actually leave the body?
You must aggressively consume chemical binders alongside your sulfur. Pectin-rich fruits, particularly green apples and pears, along with the heavy insoluble fiber found in whole grains and legumes, act as physical sponges in the intestines.
So they mop it up?
They irreversibly bind to those heavy metal complexes in the bile and ensure they are physically excreted. Additionally, integrating specific chelating herbs like fresh cilantro and chlorella algae into your daily meals acts as a powerful natural adjunct force, pulling these toxic burdens out of your deep tissues.
Okay, so we have established the sulfur and the heavy fiber to repair and clean the hardware. Now let's implement the software patch. We need to reset the nervous system. For you listening, this is where we teach you the exact mechanics of the quick coherence technique as the ultimate stress manager.
The beauty of the quick coherence technique is that it is remarkably simple, requires no equipment, but is profoundly effective at altering autonomic biology.
How does it work?
It relies on the simultaneous combination of two actions: focused rhythmic breathing and intentional emotional generation. First, you shift your entire mental focus to the physical area of your heart in the center of your chest. You imagine your breath is physically flowing in and out of your heart area, breathing just a little slower and a little deeper than you normally would.
A good rhythm to aim for is an inhalation for 5 solid seconds and an exhalation for 5 solid seconds. Slow, deliberate, and focused on the chest.
Yes. And as you establish and maintain that rhythmic, heart-focused breathing, you must make a sincere, conscious attempt to experience a regenerative, highly positive emotion. You actively try to feel deep appreciation, genuine gratitude, or profound care for someone or something in your life.
This is the critical step where most people fail. You actually have to feel the emotion physically in your body. You cannot just intellectually think the word gratitude while your mind races about your grocery list. You have to recall a memory of a loved one, or a pet, or a beautiful place, and let the physical warmth of that emotion wash over your chest.
Exactly. The emotion is the specific frequency you are trying to tune into. The rhythmic breath is the carrier wave that broadcasts that frequency throughout the body. Combining the physical breath with the sincere emotion instantly phase-locks the autonomic nervous system into psychophysiological coherence.
Let's synthesize all of this, the diet, the physics, the psychology, into a highly practical, actionable daily plan. We need a specific roadmap. Here are the 5 daily habits to support heart coherence and mitochondrial health. Habit number 1.
Habit 1 is proactive morning coherence. Immediately upon waking, before checking your phone, before reading the news, spend 5 uninterrupted minutes using the quick coherence technique. Establish a powerful, balanced, parasympathetic autonomic baseline before the inevitable stressors of the day attempt to hijack your system.
Okay, habit 2 is the nutritional hardware support.
Habit 2 is the chelation meal. Consciously consume at least one large meal every single day that is highly rich in both organic sulfur and dense fiber. For example, a heavy broccoli, onion, and garlic stir-fry served over whole quinoa or oats.
Sounds delicious.
It is, and this constantly supplies the liver with glutathione precursors for heavy metal chelation, while simultaneously providing the intestinal fiber to block enterohepatic recirculation.
Habit 3 addresses the physical flow and the pipes. Movement.
Habit 3 is progressive aerobic expansion. The literature explicitly suggests starting gently, perhaps 15 to 30 minutes of walking at a moderate effort, where you can still easily hold a conversation. The goal is not to exhaust the quantum engine, but to gently train the vascular system to dilate, improving endothelial flexibility.
Right, don't overdo it.
Exactly. Over weeks, you gradually progress toward 45 to 60 minutes of sustained aerobic output to improve maximal cardiac capacity.
Habit 4 is crucial because stress is unavoidable. The midday reset.
Habit 4 is reactive emotional regulation. You must practice intentional coherence during your highest periods of acute stress. When the massive work frustration hits, or you are stuck in terrible traffic, do not let your sympathetic nervous system stay locked in overdrive. Take a dedicated 2-minute coherence breathing break right at your desk or in your car to manually shift those jagged, chaotic heart rhythms back to a smooth, healing sine wave.
And finally, habit 5, sweating out the plastics.
Habit 5 is active excretion. Utilize traditional infrared saunas or ensure your daily exercise induces a heavy, sustained sweat. Human sweat is scientifically proven to be one of the primary and most highly effective physiological excretion pathways for accumulated, leached plasticizers like BPA and phthalates. You must physically push them out through the skin before they can trigger mitochondrial pyroptosis in the heart.
If you put this all together into a comprehensive weekly schedule, it naturally flows like this. Your morning starts with your 5 minutes of quick coherence to set the antenna, followed by an aerobic walk to get the blood flowing. Midday, you consume a plant-based Mediterranean-style lunch loaded with pectin and fiber to trap any toxins your liver dumped that morning, and you utilize a 2-minute coherence break when the workday peaks in stress.
There's a perfect flow.
And then in the evening, you eat a meal rich in sulfur-intillating herbs like cilantro to arm the liver for the night. And critically, you avoid blue light screens before bed to allow your autonomic nervous system to fully downshift, ensuring deep parasympathetic repair. Over the weeks, you gradually increase your walking intensity, and perhaps you layer in some bioresonance or singing bowl sound therapy on the weekends to further tune the cellular frequency.
And if you follow this holistic, multi-scalar protocol, the signs of progress will become undeniably apparent to you. You won't just see it on a blood test. You will physically feel the transformation. You will notice a dramatic increase in exercise capacity and far fewer feelings of breathlessness, simply because your heart is no longer struggling to pump against massive systemic arterial resistance and calcification.
And energetically, what does a repaired quantum engine feel like?
You will experience a profound, sustained increase in emotional resilience. The small daily annoyances won't trigger massive, exhausting adrenaline spikes anymore. Most importantly, you will have a subjective, undeniable feeling of increased, sustained physical energy throughout the entire day. Because down at the microscopic subatomic level, you are actively clearing the oxidative stress. You are shrinking the gap between the mitochondrial protein complexes, and you are fully restoring the magnificent, profound efficiency of quantum electron tunneling inside the heart.
That is an absolutely incredible journey to conceptualize. Let's do a quick recap of the massive ground we just covered. We have traveled all the way from the subatomic quantum teleportation of electrons inside your cellular mitochondria, up through the structural integrity of your physical heart valves and your single-cell endothelial lining.
It's a lot of ground.
It really is. We have seen the profound, measurable impact of your daily emotional coherence and the hidden, fiery dangers of the toxins in our modern environment. And we have laid out exactly how to eat, breathe, sweat, and move to reclaim your internal biological coherence and heal your heart from the inside out.
We have successfully reconstructed the paradigm of the heart. It is not merely a mechanical pump doomed to eventually wear out. It is a quantum, bioenergetic, conscious antenna deeply connected to the environment around it. And that brings us to one final, truly profound paradigm shift to leave you with.
I'm ready.
If your heart's electromagnetic field is genuinely 100 times stronger than your brain's field, and we know that it dynamically alters your conscious, physical perception of reality based entirely on its rhythmic coherence, well, perhaps the heart isn't just an engine keeping you alive. Perhaps the heart is actually your primary organ of perception, actively feeling, interpreting, and responding to the universe before your brain even has a chance to formulate a single thought about it. If that is true, what is your heart picking up right now?
Wow, that changes everything. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Take a deep, slow, coherent breath, focus on your chest, and step into your day with a completely new rhythm.